There are moments in one's life when you know that something fundamental has changed and you'll never be the same. I took a month off from doing Bardcasts because I knew such a moment was coming, and I don't mean the news that I just alerted you to in that introduction. I meant I knew something was coming as far as research was concerned, that I would have to go down a certain rabbit hole, and I had to be undisturbed. Over the years, I've come to recognize them as being so significant that I've got no choice. I've simply got to go there. And I knew that this was coming, and I could feel it. I had no idea that it was leading to where it has led in the political news that the world is only just beginning to hear about. But I knew it was significant as far as Shakespeare and that story and the codes are concerned. Now, there have been many such moments, of course, on this 17-year journey. One was right at the very, very beginning when my dear friend Michael Dunn introduced me to the Shakespeare mystery. Went and saw his one-man show, and it just changed my life right there and then. And I knew categorically I would work on this immediately. And I often joke that I haven't had a day off in that time, and it's basically true. But it was inevitable, and it's been a great joy and a privilege to be on that journey all this time. Another moment would be when I first realized that this was not what everybody thinks it is. It's not that the man from Stratford that we're all taught is Shakespeare stole the works of somebody else, and that it had to be hidden because that person was a nobleman or a member of a secret society, or for some other reason that we don't know. It was not that at all. It was that this was actually created as a puzzle for us to sort out, that there was something being taught to us in the actual hiding of this person's identity. Just like we all have to find out who we truly are. It's a mystery. It's a puzzle. It might be someone else. It might be that the whole thing is really like a Da Vinci Code. And I began to realize that. Yeah, it is, except this one's real. This is somebody hiding behind a very mystifying mask, again, in order to teach us something. The next big moment that was type that I'm talking about here was realizing that the first folio that's the book of 36 plays, most expensive textbook in the world. Last one went on sale for close to $10 million now at auction. That it has a load of wrong page numbers in it, and that those wrong page numbers are not mistakes. They are part of the puzzle. They are part of the codes. So here's page 264 in the middle of Twelfth Night, and Malvolio is saying, "No man must know. No man must know." What follows? The numbers altered. No man must know. And sure enough, you look at the next page along, and it's 273. It's telling you clearly there's something going on here, and I'm giving you clues along the way if you're paying attention. A little further down, it starts talking about Emoeidas, sway my life, and he says, if this fall into thy hand, revolve. And that realization alone was one of those moments. The whole thing is about these mirror image codes. Revolve. MOAI becomes IAOM. IAOM, the secret Freemasonic password that is not a word, it's a breathing technique, a pranayama technique for raising consciousness. So already we're in the realm of there's something mystical going on here. This is not just some ordinary sleight of hand. Oh, it's not the guy you think it is. 426624 was another. 426, April 26, Shakespeare's baptism. 624, Edward de Vere's death. Both of them fixed in order to fit the codes. I had to put it into a book with two different stories, one white, one black, one at the beginning, the to be, one at the end, not to be. Frankly, that was in some ways just to placate the Stratfordians, so that I would give them a half a book they could read that says, yeah, it's your guy. Or maybe it's this other guy. I'm not saying, I'm just neutral. I'm laying it out there for you to examine. That was the purpose of that book. Of course, I believed that the person was the hidden person in 624. But now it becomes even more deep when you then realize, this has been delivered to John Dee by angels who deliver him the Enochian tables, which has 624 characters in it, which is delivered to him on 624, June 24th in 1584 in Krakow, Poland. And then the realization that when you then add up all the three parts of the coding together, the gravestone, monument, and sonnet's dedication, it's obviously these are moments of high recognition that you've got to go down that rabbit hole. There's nowhere else to go. I've got to put those 624 characters into the Enochian tables, point them at each other so that we get to see what it's saying. Going across, all you need is the key. The key is the double T, and the double T's point to certain letters in the Enochian tables, and they spell out living page. And then you send them back the other way from the Enochian tables to the gravestone, monument, and sonnets, and they give you yo stigmata. Then he says, revolve. If this fall into thy hand, revolve. Turn it around. Mind-bogglingly impossible as it would seem, you turn it around and it gives you I have hewn desiderata, a Shakespearean rhyming couplet. Living page, yo stigmata, I have hewn desiderata. There's a page kept alive, a document somewhere. Yo meant pay attention. Medieval word. Pay attention to. Really focus on the stigmata. Christ's stigmata wounds, where I have hewn, cut into stone, desiderata, my desires, what I want you to know. Very clear as day. And I knew at that time, my goodness, I was going to say I've cracked it. Literally, I cracked it. I can remember that night of excitement. It's in the altar, whatever it is, there's something in the altar stone in Stratford's church. I went out to celebrate with my daughter, Alana, told her, I've got it, it's clear as day, it's a rhyming couplet. I thought that was the end of the journey. It was almost only the beginning, it had hardly started. And the picture I'm showing you on screen here is, I come home that night after celebrating with my daughter. I said, I know it's in the altar, I don't know how I'm going to get it, but I've got to get it, right? And I'm driving my Prius into my garage, and I'm just, I didn't even drink at this celebration. I wasn't drunk or anything. I'm backing into my garage. I'm just like, yay! And I clipped the wing mirror on my Prius, and it broke like this. I kid you not. Staggering. I go, and I look at it and I think, what? It's shaped in a perfect V for Vere, truth. 17th Earl of Oxford, yes, is Edward de Vere. There are precisely 17 cracks forming a V shape. And the key to solving it is an upside down cross, right? You've all seen other presentations where I show this. An upside down cross, and I look at this closely, and there's one horizontal line right here and a vertical line going through it, totally separate from the others, an upside down cross. How do the angels or whoever's choreographing this manage this? It's absolutely mind-boggling. But it's a little indicator. You're on the right track. Keep going. I kept the mirror, obviously. And you think that's just crazy. But I've got to go. I've got to go now. I've got to scan the altar, and here I am in the church. Yes, with the gravestone behind me, and it looks like that. And then up on the wall above me is the monument that has its own codes, and behind me the altar that I've got to scan, and we have to scan it with subterfuge. Hide it behind a banner, turn the lights down, scan it to get the scientific proof. All these are the moments that you know you've got to do, which is why I'm showing you these. Get the results of the scan. Here's me actually showing it in a presentation where I had built a life-size copy of the altar, a replica to show, so that you got a sense of it. You could touch it and feel it. My God, instead of a tiny, tiny little child's shoebox size, it's a whole 250 times the size it's supposed to be, a cavity that proves the codes were right and proves there's something in there, still there, waiting to be discovered. All these moments are matched with little hints like that. You know, you're right. Keep going. And so what I'm wanting to tell you here is that last month I took that time off because I just knew. I could feel it coming. I knew I had to go down another rabbit hole, and it would be as big as these other moments have been. The interesting thing is, it was alerted to me by one of you. You know, I've encouraged you to write in and give me your ideas. So this guy, Phil Ricketts, writes to me, says, the barcode, I'm looking forward to the next show, I presume. And he puts a link in there. Immediately search for this image after seeing your video. I am resisting impulses to start puzzling myself. And that image that he linked me to was this. The cover of the King James Bible, published in 1611. Well, I'd looked at this before, but never deeply. And here's this person following the Bardcast and saying, hey, I think you should look at this. And I went, wow. I knew right away he was right. I looked it up and went straight to the one thing that is known about the King James Bible, which is that Psalm 46 has a mystery about it. Because, well, 46 words from the beginning is the word shake, and 46 words from the end is the word spear. And people have thought, what's that about? Is that a hint that maybe Shakespeare was involved in the translation of the King James Bible? In 1611, the official guy, Shakespeare from Stratford, is still around until 1616. And so if Shakespeare is around and King James wants really good writers to the Bible, obviously he's going to call on the best writer in the world, right? It's not that he translated the whole thing. It's a massive, massive undertaking, and there's a lot of historical documentation to show that it was undertaken by certain people. They were each given a certain book of the Bible that they were in charge of, etc. But it has a unifying voice to it. It has this unifying flow that you couldn't get from a commission of saying, let's try and get 48 or 50 people all to write in a similar style and make it sound like a novel written by one person. It's got this harmonious flow to it. So someone oversaw all of that, and there's been this question: was that Shakespeare? That's about all that I knew, and I don't think anybody has particularly gone down that rabbit hole. But when Phil Rickett wrote to me, I just knew that's it. And I had started going down it because he wrote me on November 4th. And I had started going down and found a lot of stuff. It was only as I got to a halfway point in it that I realized last month I had to take a month off and go deeper into this and be just undisturbed. The original psalm that it comes from, it turns out, in the Greek, in the Septuagint version, was Psalm 45. Why was it changed to Psalm 46? That's interesting. And it was originally called a psalm concerning secret things. And the word that got translated to shake was troubled. And it was the 50th word, not the 46th. And the word that got translated to spear was weapon, and it was the 43rd from the end, not the 46th. So there's some engineering has gone on in order to bring this into place. And why change it from 45 to 46? And the distance between troubled and weapon was 107 words, whereas on the new version it's 111 words, and that is significant where 107 isn't necessarily. Another aspect is you've got these 3 words Selah, which are not part of the psalm, but they mean a pause for prayer, to consider what you've just read or heard or spoken. In the original, though, there's only the 2. There's not a third at the end. So this seems to be changed in many ways. From the very beginning to the end in the original, it's 198 words. But in the new version that has been translated for the King James Bible, it's 201 words. So it's totally different. Well, 201 is the structure of, if you recall, we've got 154 sonnets, and they are placed into a pyramid shape on a 17 base, and you get to the pinnacle, and it should be just 153, but there's 153 and 154. They're the same sonnet written ever so slightly differently in order to be melded into one. Alchemy. And so in the absolute center of that structure, you would have 77 sonnets on each side, and there would be no, if they all had the same number of lines, there would be no one central place that you could locate and say the center, because he always wants to put the most important thing in the center. There's no center line you can look to and say, oh, or even a center word. It's just 77, 77. So how do you find the center of this? But it does turn out that there is a center, because 2 sonnets are highly irregular. There's a couple more that are irregular, but these, Sonnet 99 has 15 lines in it instead of 14. It's the first line says, the forward violet thus did I chide. And it works perfectly without that line. The rhyming scheme works perfectly if you just cut that line out. Sonnet 126 has 2 lines missing at the end, so it only has 12 lines. And so because of this discrepancy, 1 extra but 2 less, you've got a middle line. There's a middle line to the whole sonnet structure, and it's this line. The end of Sonnet 77. It says, shall profit thee and much enrich thy book. What shall profit me and much enrich the book? Well, there's a triple tau right next to that. That's always significant, but it's very rare that you get 2 triple taus in the same sonnet, and that triple tau ends on the vacant leaves. Vacant leaves is literally the blank pages. In printing terms, pages are leaves. Vacant, blank. There are 2 blank leaves, and it says down here, commit to these waste blanks, and of this book, this learning, mayest thou taste. Commit to them. Include these 2 waste blanks, they're called. And there are two completely blank pages where paper was very, very expensive, very valuable in those days. All the rest of the sonnets are scrunched in, but there's two entirely blank pages. It's part of the code. There's two missing sonnets that really are referencing TTT, I am that I am, sacred. They're the name of God. Oh, yeah, blank, because you can't see God or name God, but they are to be part of the encoding. Okay, so that gives you a total that is 154 plus 256. After the sonnets comes A Lover's Complaint, which has this very peculiar number of stanzas, 47. It doesn't make any sense in typical poetic structure. But 154 plus the 47 plus the 2 gives you what you're looking for. The 154 plus the 47 is 201 stanzas. That's exactly the structure of the Great Pyramid. And he's mimicking the Great Pyramid with the sonnets. He's making a pyramid of sonnets. It's 201 courses, but there are these two invisible courses that you can't see from down below because they're almost non-existent now. They have been worn down by time, and there's just a few stones left. But there's two more, making 203. So when you see 201 words there, I think, okay, I'm this is a rabbit hole I've got to go down. There is something going on here. This is mimicking the structure of the sonnets. That's the sonnets plus A Lover's Complaint. 201 complete. Look at that. But I'm looking deeper into it, and I see right next to the word midst here, there's a cross been put in. Just a cross. And there's no cross next to the equivalent word over here in the Greek, depths. There's another word midst here, and there's a cross in that verse. The word midst is there, but there's no cross. And there's another cross here next to our refuge. Well, that's a triple tower, isn't it? That's the three T's, the three crosses, the triple tower that says I am that I am. And if you put those, just the two that are in the midst, and this is very, very, very significant, the two that are midst, because the Bible in Genesis talks about the midst of the Garden of Eden that has two trees in it, the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. So those two crosses are two trees, are two T's. If you use just those two, then you've got 203, and it's giving you that present state of the Great Pyramid. But there's still something missing, isn't there? There's the ultimate pyramidion, which no one knows, was it ever there or was it not there? It's usually represented by the eye of Horus and the Egyptian myth of that story of Isis, Osiris, Horus. So when you add that final cross, our refuge, our home in God, you've got the final missing I am that I am, the divine. Bingo. It's been completed. So very clearly Psalm 46 is, yes, there's something there. Is it Shakespeare? Yeah, we don't know for sure, there's no proof, but my goodness, it's referencing the sonnets and the structure of the sonnets, so presumably yes. Midst is a translation of, in the original, depths. It's not the same word at all. The second one, midst, here is in the original. God is in the midst of her. But it says here, God is in the midst of her. Okay, that's been translated fine. She shall not be moved, it goes on. It's talking about Jerusalem. That's the city of Jerusalem. God is in the midst of her, the city. This is the Davidic covenant that God makes with King David. Say that he will be, his line will last forever, his royal line. King David, covenant. She shall not be moved. She shall not be moved. Right? She's in the center there. But remember, this psalm is about secret things. God shall help her. God shall help her. Okay, it's all been translated perfectly fine, in fact, not changed at all. Then the original, with his countenance, and now, and that right early. What? I'm sorry, how do you get that from with his countenance? So is this about Jerusalem? Yes. The city. It's also about the temple in the city where God is in the midst of it, in the midst of that temple, Solomon's temple, son of David, where the Holy of Holies contains the Ark of the Covenant. God to spear is 156 words. Shake to the end of the whole thing, the last word, is 156 words. That's the structure again, isn't it? The 154 plus the 2 missing, invisible sonnets. This has been carefully crafted to tell us, yeah, this is, Shakespeare's got something to do with this for sure. But remember, midst and midst, it happens in, as I said, in Genesis, you get Genesis 2, out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life, also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So it's hinting that both of those are in the midst of the garden, and then in the next chapter 3, talking about the talking to the snake, Eve says, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And Satan, the serpent, says, you're not going to die. Don't worry, ye shall not surely die. All right? For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So he's literally saying there, it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil that she was told she shouldn't eat of, and the serpent's saying, nah, go ahead, take a bite. But prior to that, it's saying the tree of life is in the midst. So both trees are in the midst of the garden, just as they've put those 2 crosses into Psalm 46. I get my hints about these things in the most peculiar ways. I order books online. I wish I could support mom and pop bookstores, but there are none left, and at least they kind of sell their books through Amazon to some degree if you order secondhand. So whenever I order books for the convenience of getting them, and I can't get them anywhere else, yes, I order through Amazon, but I order secondhand, so that I'm at least getting, there's some of that payment is going to the poor person that eventually ended up having to sell it through that methodology. So I get secondhand books, and it's always interesting because then you read what other people have written in them in the marginalia. So I don't know why, but in the midst of this rabbit hole that I was going down in, by now sort of mid-November, I get a book on the world's first number systems. It's a 900-page book. Can't even remember why I ordered it in the first place, but I open it up and there's on the only page in its 900 pages that has a picture, not even a picture, just a graphic of the 3 pyramids. There's a piece of paper, a note for me. Somebody left it in the book, and I open it up and it says the 2 trees in the Garden of Eden. 1, the tree of life, and 2, the tree of good and evil. Now this is not unusual anymore. I just go, another message from God, thanks. Great. But it's just, how is this choreographed? And I'm already working on this, so I'm going, yeah, I got it. The 2 trees in the midst of the garden, got it. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, there they are. So, having put midst in another place where it's not in the original, it seems that these are important. So I start doing my usual thing and I count words. God to midst is 79, and midst to the end is 123, and the ratio of that is 1.56. All right, and then if I go take a different tack and go through the cross and even include the cross to the midst and the other crosses down to the end, different numbers, but it's still 1.56. And now if I include the other midst, go from the God to midst and midst to midst, because there's two midst in the garden, totally different numbers, but the ratio is still 1.56. And then if I say, oh, well, let's include everything, to go include the selahs and the refuge and go to the middle and then to the end, the second refuge, it's 1.56. This is deliberate. You reach this point, you go, well, this is slam dunk. This is deliberate, but deliberate telling me what? I mean, if you use only characters, or characters plus towers, or characters and towers and the selahs halfway, or characters and towers and the selahs all the way, it's always the same number, 156, 156, 1.56, 1.56. What are they saying? What are they telling us? Psalm 45 doesn't have any of this in it. It's been turned into Psalm 46. It's a message. So you do understand, I know I've got to stay with this, but what does it mean? Why 46? And why 156? Well, the way I always know now to go into these things is if this is John Dee and Shakespeare, who, as you know, I believe is now, I was totally convinced it was only Edward de Vere for a long, long time, but I now know differently. Bacon is absolutely a part of this, and I don't know who wrote what, where, when, but they're both part of it, and they're both part of it with John Dee, the cryptographer, and Bacon carried on his cryptography. And all I know is I recognized John Dee's system from having decoded more codes than I could ever show you. I could show you 200, 250, where his signature's all over it, but I'll never... We'll get to that in a moment as to how I'm going to actually put that out finally, because I'm excited to be able to archive it at last. But the way to get to this is to go deep into those codings, and I cannot possibly present them all in Bardcast. I did a calculation the other day. 17 years. I've absolutely done 8 hours a day for 17 years. I had a couple of days off at Christmas occasionally, but 8-hour days was nothing for me. I would be working 12-hour days, 16-hour days, 18-hour days, sometimes 24, because it's so thrilling. So even at the minimum of 8 hours a day, it's 50,000 hours. Mostly it's been double that. So let's assume I've put 75,000 hours into this. You can imagine, it's not. I want to archive all of this work and put it out there. And so finally I'm being given the opportunity to do so through the Resonance Science Foundation that Nassim Haramein, who I work with, and with Robert Edward Grant. So I think on your screen right now you'll see an URL to go to. Not a 17th Earl, just a URL and an address. Do we have it on screen? Good. So please go there and join the wait list, because it will be announced very, very soon. But it got delayed because of this rabbit hole that I had to go down. But I am going to be putting out a massive dump, which I anticipate I'm going to be working on for 6 months here in utter seclusion, just doing them every day like this, to put them out. And still they won't all be out, but that's the only place that I can put them where they will all be archived and safe forever. Now they are paid courses, Resonance. I don't even know at this moment what they're going to be charging for them, but it's an unprecedented opportunity to catch everything. Now I'm giving you as much as I can on Bardcast, but literally if I did a Bardcast every week for the rest of my life, I wouldn't get it all done. So there's no way it's going to come to you, all of it that way. But we're trying to cover most of it here, as much as possible. So there's the information on that. It's just a reminder to please go and sign up for the wait list, so you will hear the information as to when that's coming out. But the methodology I will be teaching in those courses specifically. I'm showing you a lot of it right now, but the actual methodology of how it's done, I will be teaching you how to find these codes yourself, because there must be just tons and tons and tons of them that I will never find. I mean, it's just, it requires more people working on them. So it's a fun pursuit if you fancy that. Probably Phil Rickett will. He said he could hardly refrain from puzzling himself. So I go to it and I know, well, what I've got to do is I've got to calculate how many characters there are. That's Dee's methodology. He's going to put the characters into a grid, right? And it's usually the entire thing. Down at the bottom was who engraved it. But that's, I can see by looking at it that that's part of the code, because it's got bad spelling, wrong, it's got incorrectly spelled words. I won't go into all of that, but those are the clues. But in other words, you see the clues and you realize, oh yeah, that's definitely a grid. I've got to count the characters. Well, how many characters are there? There are 312, and 312 is precisely half of the Enochian tables that was given to John Dee. 624. 3112 is half of that. And it's in a 12 by 26 grid. Well, then all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's the 156 and the 156 here. That's, each of those is one quadrant of the Enochian tables. That's why that number has been cropping up. How interesting. So yeah, it's the whole Enochian tables, the whole 624. I'm obviously going to have to put this into that grid. It's very simple. That's half of the Enochian tables. And when you put the Holy Bible containing the Old Testament, all of that into a grid, it looks like this. Perfect. With the Holy Bible right at the top. Now, again, always the most important part is what's in the middle. I will find where truth is hid, though. We're hid indeed within the center, says Polonius in Hamlet. Always within the center you look. And right there in the center is these letters, Micah. Who's Micah? Micah is an Old Testament prophet, isn't he? Micah. Okay, there's an H, but you're dealing with just the straightforward square in the middle. That's Micah. Undeniable. What's Micah famous for? Well, I won't make you read the whole analysis, but the summary is Micah makes the startling prediction that Jerusalem, the holy city where the Davidic king resides, and the temple, will be wiped off the face of the earth. Not a very popular prediction. They want to kill him at the time, but he just says, well, go ahead, kill me. I'm just the messenger. And the king realizes that this is a warning, and he decides that Micah is right, and perhaps we have strayed from the path, and we are not observing the Mosaic covenants that we should be, that Moses gave to us through Yahweh. Or Yahweh gave through Moses, I should say. And they try to mend their ways, but it's not enough. And Micah turns out to be correct. He's predicted that there will be nothing left of Solomon's temple. Well, remember there are 312 characters. Micah 3:12. Where does Micah make this prediction? Micah 3:12. Therefore, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field. Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins. Oh, that's a prediction. Micah 3:12. Here it is. Micah chapter 3 and verse 12. Does anybody else talk about the temple being destroyed and the temple possibly being rebuilt the second time? Yes, Ezra. Ezra, here he is talking about the building of the temple, and he writes in chapter 5 and in chapter 6 about the dedication of the second temple. And Ezra has a particularly pertinent connection to this, because he was present at the destruction of the first temple when he was a young, maybe only a boy, but probably a teenager as a scribe. And then he gets brought back from the exile from Babylonia and is there at the building of the second temple, later called Herod's temple. So he bridges the span of, the first temple that was destroyed, and now he's writing about the second temple, and that's Ezra. Well, there's Ezra's name connected to Micah, right in the middle, in the shape of a cross. Yes, it's an S and not a Z or a Z, but, I mean, its homonym it's Ezra. It's right there. Okay, so it seems I've got to put this into the Enochian tables, because that's one of the ways. There's two ways to solve these things. There's an Enochian tables methodology that gave me the original codes that showed the altar, right? It's double T's. You search out the double T's, and the double T's are going to be pointing to certain letters in the Enochian tables. Here's the Enochian tables put into a grid, but we've only got one half of it, so to put the other half in, I'm just going to revolve it, right? Because we're told to do that in 12.9. If it's falling to that hand revolve, just put it in the other way around and see where the double T's point. And the double T's are going to point to certain letters, and look at the letters they point to. Ezra, CLVI, those are Roman numerals for 156. What? And para, a Greek word I'll come to in a moment. The 156 is the one quadrant of the Enochian tables, right? What he's been hinting at here, 156. But why 1.56 as well? Oh, is that maybe giving us a clue about chapter and verse? Chapter 1. So I decided I'm going to put all this 156 into every possible combination. Every possible combination of those three numbers to give you the various possibilities that it might be Ezra chapter 15, verse 6. But there's no verse 56. There is no chapter 15 or 16. There's no verse 61. It turns out the only possibilities of all the options that you can put these numbers into is Ezra 5:16 and Ezra 6:15. Well, so you go to Ezra chapter 5, verse 16, and chapter 6, 15. And it turns out these are the very verses where he's talking about, at 5:16, he says, laid the foundation of the house of God which is in Jerusalem. This is the first time he mentions the start of the work on the second temple. Laid the foundations, 5:16. And what does he say at 6:15? That's the day they finish it. This house was finished on the third day of the month, 6:15. The Enochian tables, given to John Dee by angels, tells you. Look at Ezra 5:16 and Ezra 6:15. That's the beginning of the second temple and the completion of the second temple and its dedication. My goodness. So yeah, you're on the right track. Keep going. 5:16. I mean, it just happens to be that the second temple was completed in 516 BC, but I can't even hang a hat on that and say, yeah, because that would imply that Ezra knew what BC meant, and no one talked about BC before BC. That implies that he knew when Christ was going to be born 516 years later. And so, I think I'll write it as 516. So I'm not even going there, but just stick a pin in there. 5:16 and 6:15 are palindromes of 156, aren't they? And 156 is half of 3:112, Micah 3:12, and 3:112 is half of 6:24. That's the one quadrant or the two quadrants or the whole shebang of the Enochian tables. We're being told something here. Para, what's para? It's a Greek word that literally means to lay beside, next to, but contrary to. It's literally the instructions for how to solve this. You lay it beside the other grid and next to, but contrary to. So you know you've got to do it again and turn it around one more time and see what now these letters point to. Absolutely stunning. How yes, you're quite right to be mind-boggled at this point. It turns out that if you twist that around, they're pointing to the same letters. Two sets of T's are. So I'm going to just show you where they lead to. There's a very slight difference in the letters, but they give you a second anagrammatic solution. De Vere, arc, the P and the AO, that's the Greek letter rho, which is the Christogram. The alpha and the omega with the Christogram in it, which has to have a cross attached to it, and you will see it does. And A to Z is the Roman way of saying alpha and omega. Alpha and omega, Greek, I am the beginning and the end. A and Z, I am the A and the Z. D says it also with I am the Aleph and the Tav. The beginning and the end, what Christ says, I am the beginning and the end. Well, the De Vere is the Holy of Holies, isn't it? In Solomon's Temple, in which the Ark is placed. There's the Holy of Holies, there's the Ark. Is that enough to let you know that, yeah, this entire thing is talking about the Solomon's Temple? The first one and the second one? Why is this a secret message in the King James Bible engraving? I'm not even going to show you the second half, but you can revolve the whole thing around and do it with the letters from the Enochian tables pointing back to the grid, and it gives you two more messages that are absolutely dead in line with telling you how to solve this. So remember this, I get this 2 trees in the Garden of Eden. As I'm in the middle of this, I'm now realizing I've got to look at Jerusalem, and I need to know, is this about the old buildings of Solomon? Yeah, it's about Solomon's Temple. It's about the next one, the second temple, later known as Herod's Temple. Isn't that a big political, world-shattering hot potato of World War III proportions that is now a question between the Jews and the Muslims as to who owns the Temple Mount, where they believe Solomon's Temple was originally? It's beginning to look serious, and I'm thinking, well, I'd better look at some renowned archaeologist who has written about what's there. And so I order a second book, second hand. I get this book by Kathleen M. Kenyon, renowned. She's written 14 books on archaeology, most of them all about digging up Jerusalem. I open it up, and there's I know you won't believe this, but I swear to God on my daughter's life. I open it up, and there's a postcard in there on page what? 264. I look at the postcard. The postcard is a picture of something called the Passionspieler. It is put on in Oberammergau every 10 years for the last 4 centuries. They rehearse it for 10 years. Every person in the village plays a part. Hundreds of people are involved, and it's a tradition that they have done every single decade since the time of just after King James Bible. And this is in the book at page 264. What? What? Isn't that the secret to solving the whole mystery? Yes, it is. Oh, just another little nudge. Keep going. And what is this postcard? Oh, it's a picture of Christ ascended with 2 trees, 2 crosses. He's not on the cross, but the 2 trees. Remember? The 2 trees in the midst of the Garden of Eden. Oh, and also an angel carrying a Holy Grail, and Moses with the 10 Commandments. It seems to be hinting at the Ark. I don't know this particular scene in the whole play. I haven't gone into it, but there is. Here we have Do you know that there's a connection between the Garden of Eden and Solomon's temple? Solomon's temple was supposedly built to mimic what they thought was the structure of the Garden of Eden based on Genesis, where it says, in the midst of the garden is the tree of life and the tree of good and evil, of knowledge of good and evil. In the midst of, and the midst of Solomon's temple, there's the ark placed in the midst of, inside the Holy of Holies. And they have the symbolism of the triple Tau, the I am that I am, the ultimate name of God, the ark, supposedly where God resides and speaks to Moses from the two cherubim on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, inside the Holy of Holies, whose Hebrew name is the Vere, yes, and whose symbolism is SSS, Stiletto Sidesh Solo, residence of the Lord in creation, the truth. And then it goes on, the garden is equivalent to the holy place, and the land of Eden is the equivalent of the court of Israel. Again, I can't give all this information, it's too much, but that'll be in the ultimate courses on resonance. He even puts it into the coding of the gravestone. When you put the gravestone into a 17 grid, you find it is literally structured like the Garden of Eden, with the mimicking the residence of the Lord, the Ark, and the Holy of Holies, midst of the garden, the triple Tau and the triple S. Blessed and cursed, knowledge of good and evil, the two trees. It's all there, and John Dee has put it into Shakespeare's gravestone, and now we're seeing it in, my goodness, the King James Bible. But that was just going into the Enochian tables. Now there must be something in the grid itself, separate from the Enochian tables. What is in the grid? Because he always works both ways. That's what's so astounding about it. There are messages hidden in the cryptography of the structure of the grid itself. So the first thing I'm going to look for always is a triple Tau. I always see, is there a triple Tau? And there's only one, and it's right here. But it turns out it's right next to a double Y, and Y is the printer's thorn. Remember, it's literally, Y means TH. Blessed be ye man, that means Y literally is a substitute for TH. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. So Y is a TH, and a TH is the symbol ligatured together that you see here. There's a TH, but it's not a TH, it's a ligature of a T and an H connected, just like the secret symbolism for the triple Tau, which is in the form of three T's put together that actually look like a TH, because they literally mean Templum Hierosolyma. Templum Hierosolyma of Jerusalem. Temple of Jerusalem. Solomonis, Solomon's temple. It's symbolism for Solomon's temple. It's symbolism for the name of God, the I am that I am, that resides in Solomon's temple, the Holy of Holies and the Ark. Well, here it is, and you've got, there's the triple Tau, but it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same encoding as John Dee put into Shakespeare's gravestone. Jesus, there's no Shakespeare name on the gravestone, there's only Jesus' name. Jesus is the top of the cross. It's a Tau cross with T, 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 Y, Y in as the stipes of the cross. So that's a pretty good hint that, oh yeah, John Dee is doing this. Crossing the cross there is the word backwards, set. It's there in the gravestone as well on the triple Tau, set. It's also in the Vere's cross, which represents the knowledge of good and evil, and truth, the truth of knowledge of good and evil. Set, who's Set? Set is the brother of Osiris, who usurps the throne by killing his brother Osiris, cutting him into pieces. But Set is just representative of Satan, he who opposes by cutting the indivisible one into many so that we can have a creation. One is really indivisible, but cut. We all think we're different. I think I'm different from you. No, we're the same. We've been cut into pieces. to play a game, to have a creation. That's Set's job. Maya. It's a magic trick. It's a game. It's a puzzle. And it's there in the gravestone. And he's put it here, right? And there it is again, say, right next to the triple S and the triple tau. But it's here. So where is the Vious cross in the King James Bible? Well, I begin to see it here. Vere, E-R-E. There's Vere. But it has some letters next to it that I have never seen in the cross of Vere before, ever. It's usually either E-Vere or De Vere, or if it's just referring to the Holy of Holies, it'll be De Vere, like D-V-I-R or D-E-V-I-R, De Vere, not referring to his name, but to the name of the ultimate Word. The Word. In the beginning was the Word, the Om vibration. And here we have 3 letters. Oh, but remember there's he's dealing with Roman numerals. That's Roman numeral for 1,000, and C is 100, and M is 1,000. That's okay. That's interesting. Now above the Tau cross, there's a C, another C, but within the cross, there's just the M, C, M. Okay. What does this mean? Well, here's a very interesting story as you begin to get into this now in Chronicles. David is the king, and God has made a covenant with him, right? But it seems to be all on the rocks because the Jewish people are falling away from the righteous path, and God is trying to bring it all back into order, and David wants to do a census because he feels he might have to go to battle, and he asks Joab to conduct a census, and Joab says, you know, God's not going to like this. He said, the Lord make his people 100 times so many more as they be. He will give you as many people as you need to vanquish any army. Why do you want to go count them? That seems to show distrust in the Lord. But David insists, and Joab doesn't want to do it. But he says it will be a tremendous act of distrust, and God won't like it. But David insists. Okay, so it doesn't turn out well. Okay, as simple as that. He says he can give you 100 times as many people. Why do you want to go and do a census and disrupt the people? It'll cost a lot and take a lot of time. But he goes and does it, and he comes back with the numbers. He says there's 1,000 Israel, 1,000 who will hold the sword. He says, and 100,000 in some other part of the territory. 100,000. Oh my goodness, he's dealing with these numbers. But indeed, God doesn't like it, and he brings a plague. David's given a choice, but to cut to the quick, there's a plague. Pestilence happens. 70,000 people die. David is remorseful and comes to the Lord on bended knee and says, kill me, blame me, don't blame my people, please, I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have done it. How can I make amends? And the Lord says, I want you to build a temple. But you can't build it because you have been a warrior and you are a murderer. But your son Solomon is pure and he will do it. Okay. So he's told he must build Solomon's temple in a nutshell. And so David comes to his son now and says, God has told me you are the one. You've got to build this temple for him, and I am going to give you 100,000 talents of gold. 100,000. And 1,000 talents of silver. Precisely the same numbers. He's making amends for the terrible mistake he made in having a census made that revealed that there are 1,000 people who will serve him, and there's 100,000 people elsewhere that will serve him, and he's giving the same back in gold and silver, and then limitless on gold, silver, brass, etc. He says more that will be coming, hundreds of times more, and he tells his son to go build the temple. And now God is pleased. And he says, the Lord will bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Okay. So that's what those numbers are about. And so clearly we are right in the midst of, this is definitely, if you had any doubts at all, this is about the building of the temple. The first temple and the second temple. Yo. What? Don't we know that word from somewhere? Yo. Oh, yeah. Yo. Yo, stigmata. That means pay attention, really pay attention, really be careful, look closely at. Right on the cross. Yo. Why? Why have I got to pay attention? Because this is the cross of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And there's a serpent hanging off it. Yeah. Just like there is in the gravestone, serpent, Satan, and Yeshua, all intertwined. Stunning work. This is John Dee's work. There's a serpent on the tree that is now hidden in the King James Bible. On the right-hand side it says, I hide a... Oh, yeah, that's right. I hide a serpent. Yo, be careful. Pay attention. This is the truth of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's right there. Dead center. Beautiful. If you invert that cross against itself in the gravestone, you get another cross that says is a rose cross with ER in the middle, Elizabeth Regina, Tudor rose, but implying the Rosicrucians. Well, there's another cross down here, right under the green cross of tree of knowledge of good and evil. Rose crossed. Absolutely perfect. And yes, that's how Shakespeare spells crossed. Crossed. But what is crossed across it? The word ark. Oh. All right. Where is this going? I mean, the Ark of the Covenant, yes, and it seems that this covenant has been broken between David and God. And what's here? If I extend that out, the Vere cross, I get, there it is, De Vere. The Holy of Holies and the Ark that is inside it. Yes? Told to us in the Enochian tables. Okay. Where's the Ark? Ark of the... Don't tell me it's there. Yeah. But you've got to somehow bridge the gap between the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the top, the tree of life. And the Rosicrucians are telling you how to do it by this methodology, and you're going to bridge it by this covenant that touches one of the pieces of the Vere cross and one of the pieces of the Triple Tau cross, Ark of the Covenant. And you're going to say, oh, Alan, that's not an A, that's an ampersand. And I thought that at first. I thought, why didn't they write just A, and, in the text? It turns out the ampersand is derived from the Latin word et, which means and, but in Hebrew means the aleph tav, the untranslatable particle right there in the first line in Genesis. The earth and the heavens God created in the beginning. It's never translated. It's the Alpha and the Omega, the aleph tav, the beginning and the end, the ultimate eternal covenant between God and creation. It's what it means so much more to have it be an ampersand. It means the A, but it's the Ark of the Covenant. It's telling us that this is an eternal covenant. How stunning. How utterly mind-bogglingly stunning, yes? And if you want to know who's done this, well, we go back to the works that I've previously shown. Dee did this. To the gravestone. But he signed it with his typical brilliant sense of humor, as well as OOD in the shape of a 7, because his code number was 007. He was the original. Got to admire his sense of humor. It's there. Well, here's his name right under it in the most explicitly beautiful, balanced, perfect, efficient, economical way I've ever seen it. O-O-D. Right in the middle, connected by what? M-A-O-I. To Sway My Life on page 264 that tells you the entire way to decode the whole Shakespeare mystery. I-A-O-M. On 264. It also has the word monad around his name. The monad, that's D's monad, the Monus Hieroglyphica, the symbol that he created, that he placed in the first Rosicrucian manifesto that was put out in 1614. And 15 and 16, there were 3 put out. Christian Rosenkreuz and the Chemical Wedding. Christian Rosenkreuz, Christian Rose Cross. All there, utterly perfectly balanced, straightforward, staring you in the face. That's the King James Bible. And in case you didn't think it's convincing enough yet, if you make it as simple as possible, there's to be or not to be, all placed around the ark. It's pretty mind-blowing, right? And at this point, you'd think, well, that's done, but there's a perfect cross. It goes through the rose cross and connects to the ark, and it says, hidden in church, and there's an A right next to it, hidden in a church. Now, at this point, I'm thinking, yeah, I have to keep going down this rabbit hole, yes? But isn't that a serious matter? I mean, isn't that problematic? Does it mean this church? Or does it refer to some other church? And what would that mean? If this is a prediction of saying the Ark of the Covenant is hidden in a church, I'm going to tell you where it is. Well, a little bit of concern, yes? Well, it's not this church, I can tell you that. But I knew that I was in the problematic position of, what am I going to do about this? I think it's telling me where it is. Isn't that a difficult thing to broach? Isn't it the most contested piece of real estate on earth is this place where the Jews believe they have to rebuild the third temple? That's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Previously you saw the Dome of the Rock. This is what currently is believed to be the site of the original Solomon's Temple and then the Second Temple. And this is, we're looking from the east to the west to the Dome of the Rock. And so this is the south, and then going further south you have here the area which would have been the city of David, and which we will get to in the next part, which will have to be in the next masterclass. But I'm just giving you a taste of that to see my dilemma. I'm thinking it's connected to this. This is where the Wailing Wall is, where Jews are allowed to pray, but not within the whole Temple Mount area, which is now in Muslim hands. And if you start talking about the Ark of the Covenant and finding it, my God, what does that open up? World War III? I don't know. I thought I have to go where this leads, but this is start the conversation. This man, Robert Cornuke, and my friend Peter Dawkins and Graham Hancock here, they are people who have done a lot of research on this particular issue, and I will be covering it next. But for now, this is where we're going, and I will try to wrap this
I
up.
have no doubt at all that the Ark of the Covenant is in the sanctuary chapel in Axum, and I have no doubt at all that I have established how it got there. There's a tiny chapel in the center of Axum in the compound of the ancient church dedicated to St. Mary of Zion. Ethiopians believe that inside this modest sanctuary rests the true Ark of the Covenant. Now I believe it too. But only one man is allowed the privilege and burden of tending the sacred relic, Abba Tesfa Miriam, guardian of the Ark of the Covenant. He is the only man believed holy enough to stand in the presence of the Ark and live.
Now, it's at this point that I knew I had to take a month off, because there's part of the King James Bible that I hadn't gone into, and that is the New Testament part. What you just saw was the Old Testament part. It's the cover of the whole Bible, but it deals with the Old Testament. This is the engraving for the New Testament part, and it's got another kind of similar to what you just saw. There are parts of it that are completely different, then there's parts that are the same. Newly translated out of the original Greek, newly translated out of the original tongues. There's the ampersand. Commandments, His Majesty's special commandment, singular, but it's spelt right with a double M, but in the first one it wasn't spelt right because it had to be shuffled along into the grid, and then there was this line that was there, and then the rest of it is similar. And in other words, there's parts that are the same and parts that are not the same, but I know that I've got to go there. And I knew it was urgent because I did not know how to deal with this idea that in the first one it's telling me where, I can't say where the Ark of the Covenant is. I can say where John Dee and Francis Bacon and Edward Vere thought they knew the Ark of the Covenant was. That's all we can say. But they're clearly telling us. We're telling you where the Ark of the Covenant is. I must go to the second half, and that's why I took this month off. But as I say, I had no idea it was going to lead here. I've got to look at the usual system, right? How many characters are there? Yes. What? There's 264. The solution to the whole thing. Okay, you just saw the Old Testament part and that grid with Micah in the middle. Now if we're going to put 264 into the presumably the same grid, it's going to have 4 lines less, because Micah had 312. So now it is. And Micah is still there in the middle, interestingly, but not the absolute center. It's now looks like this, but right there, dead center, is what I'm looking for right away, the De Vere. And you know, okay, I'm going to take a month off and do this, because I don't know how else to deal with this tremendous piece of news. That how are we going to, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. I'm utterly lost. Don't know whether to talk about it, not talk about it, say I know where it is, or I mean, what do you do with that? It's kind of dangerous information. I'm not going to show you the top part. We're running out of time. I'm going to try to keep these masterclasses much shorter, but I will show it to you in the next one, next week. We'll do one next week. I'm going to go straight to the second half of it, which tells us, again, if you've got something in a perfect cross, it's very, very significant. And here we have a name in a perfect cross, Menelik. Menelik was the first emperor of Ethiopia. According to the medieval Ethiopian book, Hebra Nagast, he was conceived when his mother, the Queen of Sheba, visited Solomon in Jerusalem. His mother raised him as a Jew in Ethiopia, and Menelik travelled to meet his father for the first time when he was in his 20s. Now, this is, who knows, true, not true, a myth, but that's the story. And you can find it all over the internet. So Menelik, that's Queen of Sheba visits Solomon. They have an affair. She goes back to Ethiopia, gives birth to the son, and son goes back to Solomon when he's in his early 20s, and Solomon so loves him and wants him to be the king that he tells him, please stay here, but Menelik does not want to. He says, I want to go back to Ethiopia. So Solomon sends back Israelites with him to aid him in ruling according to biblical standards, and this is inaugurating the Jewish Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia. So there were no Jews that we knew of in Ethiopia, and then there's this whole line. From Solomon's son onwards, 225 generations that ended in the mid-60s with Haile Selassie being assassinated without an heir. So there's the name, Menelik. But here's the deal. According to this myth, Solomon gave the Ark of the Covenant to Menelik, and he took it to Ethiopia. Now, whether this is true or not, here's his name. Yes, there's some missing letters, but you will see why they will be connected shortly. Menelik was the king of Ethiopia. He is King Menelik. Well, right here we have another perfect cross connecting to that cross of Menelik. And it has another word that normally you wouldn't be familiar with. I wasn't. I had to look it up. Kaporet. What is Kaporet? Kaporet is the Hebrew word for the mercy seat, the gold lid placed on the Ark of the Covenant, with two cherubim beaten out of the ends to cover and create the space into which Yahweh was said to appear. This is the residence of the Lord in creation, held in the Holy of Holies. The mercy seat is the lid. The ark is wood, acacia wood, covered in gold, but the lid is pure gold. And it is where, according to Jewish belief, the Messiah will come eventually and take his throne, and the throne will be the mercy seat. Because the Jews believe that they must rebuild that third temple, and it must be built at the same place as the first and second temples were. And then to fulfill prophecy. That's what they believe, and that's why this is such an astounding story. Because how could I begin to talk about, I'm finding these codes. I just wanted to come out and say, hey, look, King James Bible. Wow, Shakespeare's involved in the King James Bible. That's a big story. That's big news. And then right away it's, no, it's about the temples. It's about both temples. Oh, it's about the third temple being rebuilt. Oh, it's about where the ark is. Why? Because the only way, according to Jewish belief, the third temple can only be built when it is no longer in the hands of the Muslims, because it's on the Temple Mount, and that's the World War III part of it, right? There have been wars upon wars upon wars fought over this land. But supposing it happens, somehow or other, they get control of that land and they build the third temple, then, according to their belief, someone will bring the ark out of hiding and put it into the Holy of Holies in the temple, and then the Messiah can come and sit on the mercy seat. The Messiah will come. Not Jesus, because of course they don't believe Jesus was the Messiah, but a Messiah shall return or come and begin a reign of 1,000 years of peace on earth. Of course, there's this little thing in the meantime about the end times. Forgot to mention that. Armageddon and all that. But assuming we get through that all right, 1,000 years of peace. I'm not being flippant. I'm just trying to deal with it in a way that I can get through all the awesome part that is coming. And I never use that word awesome because I think it's totally overused today. But in this context, it is entirely appropriate. The Kaporet is the mercy seat. And there's the word. And it's connected through the word ark. And it's connected to Menelik. But there's another Kaporet that connects actually to the letters of Menelik. The first one didn't. It just connected to the cross. I believe this is important. It's connecting to king. In fact, the K of Kaporet and the K of Menelik and the K of King are the same. Okay, they're all connected through there, and it completes another caporet that is literally saying this is the caporet connected to Menelik, in other words, connected to Ethiopia. The other one, with the arc word through it, well, let's see where this is going. Here's another perfect cross. Stone. Stone connected through the word testimony. King James Bible, the tables of testimony, the tables of stone, the two written with the finger of God. These are the tables of the Ten Commandments. They were called tables. We call them tablets now, but they were called tables of testimony, which is why sometimes it is called the Ark of the Testimony, or sometimes Ark of the Covenant. But it's the same thing, and there it is, connected through the perfect cross of stone and connected through the caporet. And here are the commandments. And look at how perfect this is. Tables of stone that thou breakest. The Lord said unto Moses, hew thee 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and I will write upon these tables the words that were in the first tables which thou breakest. You see, Moses comes down from Mount Sinai and he sees that his people are worshipping their old god, the golden calf, the Apis bull. Now, we could go into Apis bull because you know there's something there too, but let's just leave that alone for right now. They're worshipping their old gods from Egypt, and he's mad and he throws the stones on the ground and breaks them. God says, come back up the mountain and we'll do it again. Why? Well, I have never understood this part of the Bible. So he goes back and he's back up there, and they write a second set of 10 commandments. So there are 2 sets of 10 commandments. Some myths say the broken tablets are in the Ark of the Covenant. Some myths say the completed new set are in the Ark. Some say they're both in the Ark. Some say neither are in the Ark. Nobody really knows, right? But here, look, the word commandments is broken. It is literally broken with a hyphen, just as it is in the King James Bible. The tables, the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. It's broken in the Bible and it's broken in the code to infer broken commandments. Isn't that what the whole problem is about? The Jews breaking those original Mosaic commandments, and that's why the wrath of God comes back down on them, and the Davidic covenant has been broken, and Micah says, temple's going to be gone. Mend your ways. And they don't. And Nebuchadnezzar comes along and destroys the temple and Jerusalem. And then the second time it comes along after Ezra, and this time it's destroyed by the Romans and utterly, we'll get into that next week, utterly wiped off the face of the earth. With the 2 tables of testimony in Moses' hand when he came down from the mount. And how many were there? Well, let's see. There were the tables of the 10 commandments. Yes, there it is, crossing commandments, a perfect cross. Tables. The tables. But there were 2 sets, right? Broken set and a real set. So let's put tables here as well and make it cross over. Stunning. I mean, utterly mind-boggling. How can you do this? How can this be? There's another set of tables. So were there just the 10 commandments? The 10 commandments? Or were there the 10s? Were there 2 sets of 10 commandments? I don't know where this is going. I'm throwing it open to you. I'm saying, look, it's all here. This has been put in the King James Bible, the most precise, almost one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in all the codes. I mean, really, it ranks right up there. The only other thing is the original that told me that it was in the altar. Living page, yo stigmata, I have here in desiderata. But this is beyond comprehension. That this is done to such precision. But if there are 2 of everything, you know, that stone that was in stone of testimony. Here's another cross for another stone. But this time it's crossing the word Moses. Two sets of tables. One in testimony, that's going through the ark and not connected to the word Menelik. One in Moses with another caporet that is connected to Menelik. Two caporets, two stone tables, a testimony and a Moses one. Two sets of 10 Commandments, a broken set and a real set. All here. Okay. Final leg right through the middle here of the word de Vere is another perfect cross that says mercy. And that's how it's spelt in the King James Bible, the mercy seat and the testimony. But if you extend it to just include the D of de Vere, it contains the word Deus, God, and then the other two letters that were skipped out of that in mercy, sedium. And sedium is a Latin word that literally means seat or throne, and yet it is the dative case, which means it has to have the word of put after it. Getting the case right in the Latin word of sedes to make it sedium, so that it says seat of mercy. But there's one problem. It's also plural. Sedium is plural. Two seats of mercy. What this is saying, I do not know, other than what you're seeing right before you now. There are two. Are there two arcs? Are there two caporets? Are there two tables of stone? Are there two testimony and Moses one? Are there two sets of 10 Commandments? Is that what it's saying? And one is in Ethiopia? What would you do with that mercy seat? Connected right to it is the word, the great word, I am. Right under it. Oh, of course, the I am that I am, the name of God. But there's another one going horizontally through it to make a cross. I am. Is that the am I? Maybe it's what the Jews would call the Christ and the Antichrist, or maybe it's just what others would believe is the light and dark of the whole creation and the unification of the mathematics of it, the electron, protons, all. I mean, what is it speaking of, except that it's speaking of this same perfect balance that the Rosicrucian teaches about over and over again. IAOM, MOAI, 426624. I am the beginning and the end. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the A to Z, the Et, the Aleph Tov, the eternal covenant. It's stunning. The only thing that could be more stunning would be to place a structure under it that says Messiah. That looks, frankly, like an altarpiece. And it needs all to be balanced. There's a word connecting to the ark and the caporet, and it is this word tabot. And tabot is the Ethiopian word for ark, for the mercy seat, for the stones of the 10 Commandments. It's a substitute word for everything. It's the ark, it's the seat, it's the stones. It also means, however, replica. Replica. Not the real one. Okay. I am the King Messiah is what it's saying. It's utterly perfect, and that's only the second half, and I haven't shown you the first half, and I will show you that next week I'm going to do this, not every 2 weeks now, but every week until we get all of this covered. But do you see now, at that point, that's a little preview of the completion of the first part. There's way more, because there's more in the first that I didn't show you, and then there's a lot more to come. But at the moment that I got what I just showed you, that last word, Messiah, the very moment it seemed complete and I could finally talk about it, because I was thinking, well, I can't talk about this if it's saying where the ark is. I mean, how can you say that? That's a dangerous thing to say, and maybe it's not true, and I'm a lunatic, and blah, 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 but maybe I'm in, in actual danger. I don't know. That's kind of a big thing to be saying, so do I talk about it or not? And then I realized, oh, I can talk about it, because it's saying Menelik, it's saying Ethiopia. We know there's a story about the church in Ethiopia holding the ark, and that very night I learn of the unspeakable, what the world is only just now learning of. I didn't know it, and that's because the world didn't know it. The press wasn't reporting on it. There had been a media blackout. These two have a purpose together, and I've not finished showing it to you yet. But these are the people in Aksum celebrating one of their most important festivals. Where they're bringing out the tabot, the replica of the ark. Some believe possibly it's the replica of the commandments. I mean, nobody knows for sure, because it's smaller than it should be, and no one is allowed to see it but that one guardian that Graham Hancock was talking about in that video clip I showed. But they were in the middle of their religious festival. I started this work on November 4th at the behest of Phil Rickett, the prodding of. And it was happening, just beginning then, and I did not know it, and the world did not know it. And only now are we beginning to get documentation from Amnesty International and from Al Jazeera and from BBC and from Christian Science Monitor and others coming forward, and because these people were in the middle of their religious festival at this church, Aksum, in Ethiopia. And this is the interior of that church, with a very ancient Christian Bible that they proudly put on display. And on the day that we now know was November 28th and 29th, war broke out, and 1,000 of them went into the church to protect the ark that they believe is the ark that is there. And they were ushered out, and 800 of them were mowed down in a massacre. We don't have all the news yet as to where this is coming from. I mean, I'm not here to speak politically about it and say it was. I'm asking you to investigate yourself. Look it up, Aksum, Ethiopia, and you'll begin now to see, only 3, 4, 5 days ago, with the major reports coming out, that between 19th and 29th of November 2020, Eritrean troops operating in the Ethiopian city of Aksum, Tigray, committed a series of human rights and humanitarian law violations, including killing hundreds of civilians. Eritrean troops fighting in Ethiopia's Tigray state systematically killed hundreds of unarmed civilians in the northern city of Aksum on 28th, 29th November 2020, opening fire in the streets and conducting house-to-house raids in a massacre. Amnesty International spoke to 41 survivors and witnesses, including in-person interviews with recently arrived refugees in eastern Sudan and phone interviews with people in Aksum, as well as 20 others with knowledge of the events. They consistently described extrajudicial executions, indiscriminate shelling and widespread looting. Satellite imagery analysis by the organization's Crisis Evidence Lab corroborates new mass burials near two of the city's churches. Troops went on a rampage and systematically killed hundreds of civilians in cold blood. They weren't allowed to bury their dead. They would listen to the hyenas coming down at night, eating the dead. Those who tried to bury their dead were killed themselves. Of course, there were all kinds of other atrocities. We only got this news by those who escaped walking 120 miles to the nearest city, Menelik, and then being able to report. And even then the world wasn't listening, because we were consumed with the election here in the United States. It was just at the same time as all of that was happening, and so, of course, it has been subsumed. As is usually the case. We don't want to hear about these things going on in the rest of the world, but I'm not going to read the rest of this. I'm just going to let you see it on screen, and you can pause and read it for yourselves. It's almost too hard to read. Well, one thing here is that there was a cliff-top Debre Damo monastery. It was bombed and ransacked, and soldiers scaled this monastery. They had to get up, the only way that you could get up there is up on an 80-foot rope. And they went up there to kill all the monks and loot artifacts. This is the chapel behind the St. Mary's Church in Aksum, and this is the chapel where it is believed the Ark of the Covenant resides. I cannot speak. We don't know any of what its fate is, but one can only assume if they're there to climb up impossible to reach monasteries just to get scrolls and papyri. They probably took the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, why not? The dilemma for me is almost inexpressible. I mean, I don't know how to deal with just the human tragedy of it and knowing about it, and except to write to our own politicians and say, please open up the word about this, and presumably behind the scenes things are happening, but we don't know. There has been a media blackout. It is gradually opening up. But what is the timing of this about? Why is this? why find all this material in the King James Bible pointing to the very place? And yes, I will show you that it is pointing to that very church and that very place. At the very time that this atrocity would happen, I am, as I said at the beginning of this, there are moments in one's life when you know something fundamental has changed and you'll never be the same. I do not know what to do with this information, but to have been privy to it, I must share it, and to share it, it means engaging in conversation, starting the conversation, talking about the implicit meaning behind what are we being told here. These are avatar beings. These are not normal mortal beings. I do not believe that. Everything that I've seen is that these are supreme beings with a supreme message to deliver, a scripture that is hidden within this puzzle of the identity of Shakespeare, hidden within a mask. The Vere, the truth behind the mask, the de Vere, the Holy of Holies, that's the puzzle, isn't it? That's our human condition. We don't know who we are. And we're supposed to find it out. And the great joke is that we are it with the whole thing. Inside. We are that great writer inside the mask of this man from Stratford who is bumbling around, doesn't really know who he is. He's Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream. But what to do with this information now, it's up to us. And I just ask you to, if you feel moved, get involved. There is more, and I will show it to you. I want to try to keep these masterclasses shorter because it's a lot to ask of people to come and tune in for a couple of hours. I want to keep them to about an hour or an hour and a half, but this one had to be extra long because of the huge amount of material to get through, and I've still clipped a lot of it. So hopefully you'll be here next week and I will show you the other part of that I haven't shown you. And then there's also this part of the story and the fact that this area that is believed to be the original site of Solomon's temple and then Herod's temple, some believe that that is not the case. Some believe that there is no problem, that the Jews can rebuild their temple where it originally was, and those people, some believe it is here in the city of David, and here's an artist's impression, and that whole walled area where you see the western wall there is really the Roman fortress known as Fort Antonia. And so that's where we're looking now, and I don't know. I've investigated the work of Robert Cornuke, who's done brilliant work on this, and I will be showing you some of that and some of my friend Pete Dawkins' work and possibly some of Graham Hancock's work. I don't know his work on it that well, but I know that certainly the first two believe that this was Fort Antonia. Maybe they disagree on certain details of where the walls are, etc., etc., but the point is that the original temple was outside that area. And so for the Jews to rebuild their temple, they could go ahead and build it right now. Of course, it's not going to happen overnight. The tradition, it runs strong that it's there and that they are praying at the Western Wall. That is the Wailing Wall. That is the wall of the original temple. But I will show you evidence next week that indicates that, again, in the King James Bible, they are telling us no, that was Fort Antonia. And so these people's work I will be showing, And again, I just want to remind you to please go to the resonance, because in my attempt to even bring this to you, as I've said, I couldn't show you the hundreds and hundreds of presentations that I have if I went doing this twice a week or 3 times a week for the rest of life. And I'm going to literally spend 6 months pouring it all out into a form that is in 3 major big courses on the Resonance Academy. And one thing I will be teaching in that course is how to find these codes for yourself, because it is really almost like a game of Sudoku. It's not ESP, but it's Shakespeare Sudoku, except with words. You join these words in the way that you've seen me doing. The secret is to find the arc and solve that mystery. I will be showing you how to do that, because I believe there are other codes telling us other things about this whole mystery. Obviously, if they went to this much trouble, if you knew that John Dee passed in 1609, King James Bible was published in 1611, but it was ordered in 1604. So he probably worked on it for 5 years. And as brilliant as he was, and the brilliant codes that I have shown you, and some I will never be able to show you, except in this huge conglomerate of archived material. If you knew that this was going to be your magnum opus, you would make it as perfect as you possibly could, wouldn't you? And you've just seen examples of utter perfection. Utter perfection. 4 crosses interlinked. Rose cross. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. Covenant. Tree of life. Hidden in a church. Ethiopia. But this question of 2 caporets, 2 seats of mercy, 2 sets of 10 commandments, 2 sets of stones. Moses and the other version, the broken and the real, and the Tabot. So next week we will tie it together. Pray for these souls, please, if you believe in prayer. It's unthinkable, but as this news was... I was preparing to put this news out. Oh, there's news about the Ark of the Covenant. And within moments I learned this shattering news that it's... at least the one in Ethiopia is probably gone. We have no news yet. And besides these 2, there's the code in Psalm 46. Because yes, there's a code in that too. Tune in. I'll see you next week.